Hi everyone, Mary Kate McGarvey again. I'm here to go over our second topic for the 2020 school year in grade 5. So as I'm sure you already are aware, our second topic is going to be adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Um, this topic is going to take approximately 9 to 13 days. It's really going to depend on your students and your student readiness and how your students are picking up those strategies. So don't rush through this unit. This is a very important unit. It's foundation for the fraction operations. They're going to need to be able to add these fractions before they can multiply these fractions. So let's make sure we take our time. Let's make sure we establish that conceptual understanding for adding and subtracting with unlike denominators. So a couple things before we get started. Just really quickly, this is something that's different for this topic than the first topic. And I'll point this out again when we get into some of these essential tasks. But you'll notice that there are some videos, and the suggestion here is to must complete these videos before essential tasks. The reason being is Ready Common Core's interactive tutorials do an excellent job with this content. And they make it interactive and make it in a way that it's very challenging to do via Google Slides. So the thought process is have students complete the Ready Common Core interactive tutorial before instruction with you, and that way students have already experienced some of these strategies before kind of diving into these Google Slides. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go. Hopefully that makes sense. I encourage you to also watch those interactive videos because they're excellent and they, like I said, really do a great job establishing that conceptual understanding. Because once again, we want that conceptual understanding and what it means and what it looks like to add and subtract these fractions with unlike denominators before we just go straight to multiplying. Just a couple quick reminders that it is not part of the grade 5 standard to simplify fractions. Any equivalent answer will be correct. And just a friendly reminder that instead of saying improper fractions, let's refer to them as fractions greater than 1 or greater than 1 whole. And instead of using the phrase common denominator, let's use the phrase like denominator or unlike denominator if they are not the same. All right, so let's dive in. I already have these tasks up and open just kind of for time's sake. So our first essential task you'll recognize from the curriculum. Students are going to be looking at these pieces. 1 whole is 2 hexagons, and they are trying to determine the value of the other fractional pieces. So for this, students can actually drag these down. So for example, if 2 of these is 1 whole, 1 of these then would be 1 half. You can just, and what I'm doing here is I'm just double clicking in these boxes and I'm typing the fractions. And students can drag, manipulate. They might need a little instruction, kind of depending on, this really depends on if you did the scavenger hunt or not at that beginning of week 1. But they might need some help maneuvering these fractions, or you might need to show them or demonstrate, these pattern block pieces. You might need to demonstrate that to them, but they can turn them, they can twist them, whatever works for them. So this is 1 half of 1, but we know that 2 of these equals the whole. So it would really be 1/4 and so on. Okay. As we move on, they're then going to be solving this problem, same problem that they solved in the curriculum. This is a wordy problem. There's a lot of information in this problem. So kind of think about how you might want to break apart the problem. Maybe you want to hide the numbers at first, so they're just really interpreting the story and what's happening. And then you show them the numbers and get that more information, whatever works for you. This lesson's recommended for 2 to 3 days. So kind of keep this in mind. There's a little note down here that you might want to do this on the 2nd or 3rd day, depending on how long it takes to figure out those pattern blocks and those fractional amounts. Slide 6 here, students can use this to solve the problem. You could also drag these over. So let's say this would be Monday. And keep in mind, this slide is something you could share this slide with students to have them show their thinking. You could also use this slide to scaffold and help students kind of through, because it is a wordy, meatier problem. So maybe you want to have your days already written out before you share the slides. Or maybe you want to remind students, okay, what's going to be our one whole when we're solving this problem? Kind of referring them back to this. And then here we go, once again, going back to that, highly recommend. This is add fractions with unlike denominators. Please have students do this before task 11. Something to also keep in mind, especially since this is 2 to 3 days, take your time. If you're noticing that students don't have a foundation or that understanding of equivalent fractions or an understanding of adding fractions with like denominators, take some of these days too to assign some of that 4th grade work or use some of that academic flex and look at some of that 4th grade work and those prerequisite skills. Our next essential task 11, this is when we're really going to be diving in to adding fractions with unlike denominators. All of these fractions are going to be less than one whole. And there's a couple different strategies that are highlighted here. And I highly encourage you to pick the strategies that you feel will be the best for your students and to meet your students' needs. So they start off just like they do in the curriculum, folding paper. Instead of paper, they could partition the box. So these are 2 options. Option 1, option 2, they can partition the box. So these you can drag, you can resize, and they're transparent so you can kind of see them when they're on top of each other. From there, they're going to go into actually adding. So for this problem, a couple different ways that we can solve this. So we can drag and drop these boxes and resize to solve the problem. So I could do 1/2 plus 1/4, right? From here, I could rename one or both of my fractions. So I'm going to rename or resize. And once again, that Ready Common Core interactive tutorial or video that they're doing before this, they do a lot of work in that. So I could look at this and think, force, how many force are in 1/2? Or 1/2 equals how many force, right? And I could even take my work, whoops, I highlighted too much, sorry. I could take my work that I just made, drag it over. I can show my answer, that total sum. I can also type in here. So I did have 1/4, I'm sorry, 1/2, but I know that that's equivalent to 2 fourths. I kept my 1/4 here. And I can see that this equals 3 fourths. Another option, the second option, would be to use the line tool. So this is once again something that they should have practiced if they had done that scavenger hunt at the very beginning. If they didn't, practice it now, that's totally fine. I can come up line, I know that this is 1/2. I can plop a line in to show 1/2. Sorry, I'm struggling to make that straight. I can change the thickness of this if I need to, or make it dotted, whatever you need to do. And that looks like a really wonky 1/2, I apologize. Then I can come over here to my next one, and I know that I want to show, oops, sorry, line, and I can partition this into force. And from doing this, I already see I have 1/2, and then I partitioned it, each of my halves, into 1/2. Leaving me force, right? And then I can rename my 1/2 here. So I can add, this strategy is a lot more similar to what they do in the Ready Common Core interactive video. They resize using lines, It's a little easier with that because they just need to hit the plus and it adds them, hit the minus and it takes them away. So it's a little bit more user-friendly, which is why I think I would start with that before jumping to manipulating it here. Up to you, up to your students, whatever works. Just kind of thinking about how they can rename, how they can find those equivalent fractions. Keep in mind, I have some questions here because while we're making these equivalent fractions, while we're building them, we're talking about, do we notice any patterns when we're renaming these fractions? What patterns do we notice? We really want students to dig into that. How do we find equivalent fractions? Because building and drawing, as you know, isn't going to be our strategy forever. So there's a few different ones, a few different problems that they can practice here. You might want to start off by modeling a little bit heavier with maybe a little bit more of a gradual release, depending on your students. But please keep in mind, this lesson is 2 to 3 days. So take your time, don't rush, get them comfortable, allow them to practice, allow them to really build those models and really get that conceptual understanding. You'll notice at the end of Essential Task 11, we'll see it again. Highly recommend sharing this link with students before Essential Task 12. So before we dive into this instruction, students are going to jump into this Ready Common Core interactive video. Once again, highly recommend that you watch those interactive videos. From addition, with fractions, we're going to move into subtraction. Same strategies, drag and drop the boxes to resize, or use the line, or use paper folding, whatever works for them, whatever works for you. And there's space here to rename. Once again, there's quite a few problems here. Use the ones that make sense for your students and take your time. Don't rush this. This isn't made for one day. At the end of this lesson, or excuse me, essential task, you'll notice that there's another Ready Common Core video to complete before Essential Task 13, which is adding numbers with unlike denominators. So we're going to dive into here, same strategies as before. That's why that first essential task, really make sure your students have a good strategy because they're going to use it for all of these essential tasks. So adding mixed numbers, same strategies. We're going to dive into subtracting mixed numbers. They can go to Essential Task 14 after watching that or after participating in that video. Same strategies here for subtraction. The last Ready Common Core video that you'll see is add and subtract fractions and word problems. So great interactive video for students to complete. You probably noticed that all of the practice on your own work is interactive videos, leaving that grade 5 Ready Common Core lessons 10 and 11, that book untouched. So please feel free to use that book, use it in small group, assign it to students as needed. I will caution you though, because the book moves a little bit more quickly into finding the like denominator using multiplication. So kind of look at those problems ahead of time and really judge what your students' readiness level is and make sure that they really understand why we can just multiply. I hope that you found this helpful. Please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone on the math team or myself if you have any questions or need any clarification. As always, thank you so much for all that you do. We really appreciate all your hard work.